which is where we begin with the big news of the day. A lot of point guards still available, but none at the level of Kyle Lowry, who we knew had to get back with his boy DeMar DeRozan. And check this out on the Tribune, where he says this: "For me, at the end of the day, it was an easy decision. All of those roads, they led me back to the same place, home. They all led me back to Toronto. They also led him to $100 million as we bring in our Hall of Famer, who's worth more than that to us, because he slept less than Kyle the last couple of days. D.A., this deal seems to work out both sides, right? You don't have to give the 5 years, but for Lowry, the annual value is pretty good.
You know, I feel like I should be talking like Dr. Evil and Austin Powers when I talk about $100 million. But yeah, that's it's good for both teams. Obviously, the Raptors didn't want to go out 5 years, and I think Kyle realistically knew that was not going to be possible. And the idea of getting this kind of return for just a short couple of years is worth doing in his mind. And I think he and DeMar DeRozan are very close. I always thought it was going to be very difficult for him to leave DeMar. They are very good friends. And they feel like they have ownership, and they've built what's happened in Toronto the last few years, and they should. They've done a great job. And Toronto pushed all their chips to the middle of the table, keeping Ibaka as well, saying we're going to keep as much of our core together as possible in what is now a very open Eastern Conference.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I know P.J. Tucker last night, after we went off the air, ends up in Houston. So Ibaka was important. Now, this deal went down officially before Lowry did come out. How important were those two together? We saw Ingles, which we'll talk about Hayward in a second, last night maybe precluding to an easier time bringing Gordon back. Was there a, hey, look, we bring Serge back. Look, Kyle, we're bringing the band back together?
Absolutely. I think that was very important as well. And keep in mind that Serge Ibaka and Kyle Lowry have the same agent, so obviously they knew exactly what was going on with that. So, but yes, Serge Ibaka is a big part of their team going forward, because, you know, whether they keep Valanciunas or not, I think they know they have to play small ball like everybody else. And Ibaka allows you to do that at center. He can play that stretch five position. And allow you to downsize with other teams that do it. So they had to keep him, I think, realistically. But Lowry, clearly, they're going nowhere. There's no point in re-signing Ibaka if you're not going to re-sign Lowry as well. All
right, well, look, after Iggy stole your thunder on Twitter last night, good to see you're still here with us, D.A., so hang tight. We'll come back to you. Let's get to our man over here to the left in the much more know than we are, and that, of course, is our capologist. Now is his own desk.
I love it.
Man, how diva is this? And I almost tripped. They told me don't trip, and I laughed at them, and I almost fell. We're looking at a lot of money now for Toronto. They didn't bring back Tucker, but they get Ibaka, 100 for Lowry. Where are we now financially with the Raptors?
Well, they're invested, and I love this kind of deal, because you could pay Kyle Lowry a ton of money down the road for when he's not at the prime of his career and the team is reshaping. Instead, they're overpaying him now. That's okay. Short term, we saw J.J. Redick get a ton of money. But now they're looking at something like $21 million in tax. So that's a lot of tax. Can they move? There's been some rumors maybe they would move Corey Joseph. Valanciunas, we talked about that yesterday. Can they get out of this? And they have $5 million to spend in their mid-level exception. They're a taxpayer. But that's an expensive $5 million, because when you're in the tax, suddenly that $5 million might cost you $20 million total. I don't know if they can even spend that without trimming someone. So they're invested. They made the right moves. They've got to keep spending a little bit more, but they also got to trim. And I think Valanciunas, I think it's time to find a home for him. And maybe they can, maybe they can't.
Now, you mentioned Corey Joseph, who was fantastic last year when Lowry was out. The rumor that Eric's talking about was there was a report, maybe there's conversation with Indiana. Maybe they don't want to pay for a big free agent. They're not trying to win now necessarily. Does that help enough? I mean, if they relieve Joseph, what does that open up for them?
It could bring their tax bill in half, or even maybe down to like $8 million in that range. So you can cut like $6-7 million of Joseph's salary. Then you cut maybe $12 million in tax. Suddenly it's like $20 million. That's really what you're paying Corey Joseph if you look at it that way. So you could see why maybe it's time to move Corey Joseph. But then who's the backup to Kyle Lowry? I think you can get a backup at an economic price. The question is, how healthy can Lowry stay? And as you mentioned, if Lowry does go down for any extended period, you don't have a great vet like Joseph there. So it's a challenge to manage the money and manage the basketball, and that's why these guys, they get the big bucks.
All right, we've got more with you. Speaking of big bucks, the triple word score for the F there. in free agent frenzy. See what I did there? We get over to my guys over here who don't have to walk as much because when you play, you got to be careful of the knees. Of course, we've got Smitty and Stu here. So let me start with this. The idea that there wouldn't be a Kyle Lowry with a DeMar DeRozan, was that even an option of thought, considering what a setback that would be for the franchise?
I thought it would be a setback. It's hard to be able to come out and have a guy to have that type of chemistry. I played the two-guard spot, and when you have that relationship with a guy that you built, it's special. I do think, in my opinion, Stu and Casey, Kyle Lowry needed DeRozan in Toronto to be successful. Obviously, the money was going to be there, but I think he needed that situation. I think for them, like Eric said, they're in the luxury tax right now. To me, the question is, they still need that small forward. They still need that other shooter. That 3-and-D guy, is it DeMar Carroll? It's not P.J. Tucker now. Who can they fill that role? That's my question.
Stu, we saw Norman Powell step up. I thought that was clear that he's going to get a bigger role. Ibaka comes back. What did you see from Serge? And from a coaching standpoint, how much does it mean for them to now have him throughout the course of camp before the season rather than trying to jump in and figure it out the way he was doing last year?
No, Casey, I think you hit it on the head in that, they now have the advantage of having him in training camp for a full year. When they got him at the trade deadline, Serge was very productive, particularly at the defensive end. He still averaged 1.5 blocks, which was a norm for him. He stretches the floor. He's a 39% three-point shooter when he was in Toronto. But now you have a club that, takes an early exit in the playoffs, or an earlier exit than they wanted to. Now they get the advantage of training camp and a chance to sort of retool their team. We know that Lowry and DeRozan are certainly the focus of the offense, but now you have the opportunity to work Serge in if you're planning on changing your style of play a little bit. I think it was huge that both guys came back.